It happens sometimes when you catch up with old friends. You start talking and you realize, oh crap, it's 10:20. Welcome to Tigers Radio Podcast here at MotorCityBengals.com and of course at the Tiger Minor League Report. I'm Rothenberg. Still next time is Chris Brown. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartMedia, and Stitcher. Apologies on the quick delay or quick turnaround on some of these episodes, but I'll be honest, during the off season, I play it kind of loosey goosey a little bit. But when we get a season, of course, every episode will be dropping on Friday morning per normal. And so joining us before he heads out to Pittsburgh, as he's now currently the voice of the Titans, doing that transition into baseball season. Hopefully soon. Even regardless, there's still going to be minor league season. We're stoked for that. The voice of the West Michigan Whitecaps and the voice of the Road to Detroit podcast you can find on iTunes, Spotify, all the places that you can find us. Dan Hasty.
Gentlemen, gosh, are we still allowed to talk about baseball when there's a lockout going on? I'm not sure if this is okay. Is this okay?
Only certain baseball players, only the minor leaguers. Anybody on the 40-man, we can't pretend they exist.
John Dowd, everybody.
There you go. The famous slugger.
Only the real ones know what that is. You got to have a real sickness to know what that reference means, and that's why you're watching this show.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a reference.
Voice of the Titans, voice of the Whitecaps. I'd argue, voice of a generation.
Yeah.
A very, very small generation. It's a niche group. It's good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you too. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that right now we've seen the Tigers in the last week or two pick up the minor league free agent pickups, but that's not really the big thing right now with going ahead of the season for West Michigan, as it looks like the Tigers are kind of stocking up on AA, AAA, which is actually good for the Whitecaps, considering that last year the Whitecaps had, anytime a pitcher got really good, they were immediately sent up to Erie because of the depth, but it looks like, Dan, I think the Tigers have done a really good job of addressing the minor league depth so far this offseason. And what do you think the potential rotation is going to be? Because I think you saw that this evening, Jackson Joe was on 97, won the ticket. I think it was Isaac Pachenko too, I believe as well. But this rotation in West Michigan seems to be lining up very nicely.
And it doesn't matter what your offense looks like. If you have the best starting pitcher on any given day, you have a chance to win. I mean, you can have guys hit 3 home runs and you can still lose 10-3. But if you have the best pitcher on the mound that day, you're going to have a chance to win. So for me, this kind of takes me back to some of the other West Michigan teams. I mean, 2014, they were dominant on the mound. 2017, they were dominant on the mound. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see with this particular group. And what is exciting is if it tends to look like what we saw in 14 and 17, you're going to be getting that production from prospects, not from, 4-year college guys who have been in the system for 3 years, who are nowhere to be seen in the top 30. This one matters. And it now looks like, the Tigers are, in my lifetime, I've never seen the Tigers specialize in developing something at the level that they're currently developing pitching. If you go to the Detroit Tigers restaurant right now, the chef's special is written on the board, and that's the Fetter special. It's pitching. I mean, look, it's Fetter made, baby. And I love the fact that they are now able to take somebody that few teams want. Like Willie Peralta, great example last year, and turn him into something that's not only salvageable, but viable. So if you're able to get that out of Willie Peralta, what in the world are they going to do with the Eduardo Rodriguez's of the world? So I'm very excited to see what this is going to look like, especially as they get some talent. And talking to some of the people with the Tigers, they said that they've got a long way to go. And to think that they made chicken salad last year, to think about what they could have when they get more time to work on developing and it goes from the top down is really exciting.
And one of the things about that rotation last year is that the fact that you have, speaking of the development of pitching, who would have thought in the beginning of the year that Chavez Fernander, a 32-round draft pick out of Polk, would be going to the Arizona Fall League, or William Flores, just literally coming out of nowhere, who has potential to be up at West Michigan. But in Dan, this was something, and I was talking about this with Chris before. Bo Brisky, Garrett Hill, and it's just like it was a lot of non-names, but then when you saw Reese Olson come over and trade from Milwaukee, that was where I think this year, to me, out of all the times I've watched a lot of the minor league pitching, it was special, and it looked like there was a plan coming together. Even with just the comparatively speaking, we've seen more of a turnaround on the player personnel side in this offseason so far than we did last season. So, I mean, can you remember, you just as much a historian as I am, can you remember a time the Tigers had a 23rd, a 25th, and a 32nd round draft pick be that effective on the mound? It's just not, even with the numbers, just the advanced numbers look really that good.
Well, and for years, and we all kind of had to go through, the pit together. We all had to crawl our way out Shawshank Redemption style to get to where it looks today. And I think one of the things that I could put faith in early on when they invested as heavily into pitching as they did, Mize, Manning, Skubal was a nice surprise. Faedo was a big draft capital investment, was the way that baseball looked at that time, and I still think it looks that way to a point now, is if you need to buy pitching in free agency, it tends to run a little more expensive for starting pitching than it does for an equal caliber position player. I know that arms are fickle. I don't know why. I think that should be reversed. I think given the issues with arm injuries that we have in today's game, I think the everyday position player who's at a significantly less risk of blowing out his arm should be the premium price tag. But for whatever reason, we don't live in that situation. We don't live in that economy. So the way the Tigers built then, knowing that they were investing into pitching, told me, okay, if this hits, they've got pitching, then they can allocate the financial side in free agency to offensive players. That is the way this could come together. And back then, it was almost like a pipe dream. It felt so far away 3-4 years ago. We started the Road to Detroit podcast, and I was even joking after the first couple of weeks of the seasons. And I was going, how are we going to sell this? Like, how are we going to do this? And then what we saw in 2021, we saw what AJ Hinch did after that slow start and gave us a legitimate future. We got names. We now know what this can look like. And look, I don't know exactly what Fangraphs or the different baseball publications projected the Tigers to have as a record last year. You guys probably know this, but I would assume it was probably somewhere in the 60s, maybe the 70s if they were feeling generous. But let's say that they outdid those expectations by somewhere between 7 and 10 games. I mean, I honestly thought that their manager did one of the best jobs in baseball last year. So if they overachieved at that level last year, and they're able to overachieve to that same level this coming season, I saw they were projected, I think, to win 75 or 76 games. Now you're talking about an over 500 team. And if you're playing a little over 500 come, say, I don't know, July 31st, and say you've got a few more playoff teams because of a new updated collective bargaining agreement, I think all of a sudden we could be talking about a possible run. And I don't know what that run leads us to. I don't know if that's a one-game playoff. I don't know if it's more than that. In 2006, I was just happy to get into the playoffs, right? So you just never know. And I think now we have a group in place that needs to be the priority. First of all, keeping them in place, but seeing what they're capable of doing. They can do a lot with a little. And the fact that they've already gotten a couple of the best free agents in baseball, I trust what they can do getting free agents. I'm a Robbie Grossman stan. I don't know if you guys have figured that out by now, but I'm a Robbie Grossman stan. And I put on Twitter today, essentially just that he was one of the best free agent bargains, just free agent signings of last year. And I think he had like a 3 WAR, just a shade under 3. And I was like, which Tigers free agent signing posted that high of a WAR in their first year? You know how far I had to go back? I had to go back to 2012. Prince Fielder was literally the last free agent signing to post a +3 WAR his first year after signing. It's been a long time. Now you're telling me that they're able to develop the pitching, and now they start to show that they can get value on the free agent market. You know, this I can't believe we signed Javi Baez. This dude was on the cover of a video game 2 years ago, and everybody's just like, meh. Like, what are we talking about? Javier Baez. Like, come on. Like, I mean, look, I get it. He's not Carlos Correa. Sorry. I mean, who knows? He's still out there, right? But my point is that they are showing us something that we've never seen before, and that's an ability to identify future production.
Yeah, to your point, one thing I noticed today, and I didn't post this aloud because I didn't, want to be negative toward a kid, but Tennessee baseball has been tweeting out, how many days till the season begins, and today they were tweeting about Austin Simcox, and their stat about him was how he, in 1 year, he had 11 sacrifice bunts and then finished his Vols career with like 35 sacrifice bunts. And to me, that said way more than it should have, because again, I don't want to denigrate the kid, but the Tigers spent $600,000 on AJ Simcox in the 14th round back in the 2015 draft because it was one of those things where they had drafted, I forgot his name, Terry Shumpert's kid. They drafted him in the 7th round, and then he didn't sign. And so they had this money that they either, use it or lose it. So they used it on AJ Simcox, who had a solid organizational career for the Tigers. I think he was in the org for like 5 years, but that just doesn't seem like the sort of player they'd be targeting these days.
Just to make that your life goal, like just to be the person who's available for when the team wants to pay $500,000 to somebody. They're like, I don't know, who didn't we not sign yet? Oh, is it Simcox? All right, get him on the phone. Can you imagine?
Yeah, and then
he would have signed for $10,000.
Well, you still see that teams that they forget to do that. The Mets didn't do that this year or last year, I guess. They didn't take anybody they could get extra money to, and then when they didn't sign Kumar Rocker, the money just went away because they didn't have anybody else. Yeah, so it was, I don't know.
It's not like cell phone minutes. They don't roll over.
Exactly. Just like timeouts.
That a boy. Well done.
That's well played, Chris. And that's where you kind of see again, even with one of the starts in Tarek Skubal last year. Tarek Skubal was a guy who broke some organizational records last year in terms of rookies for strikeouts. He did allow 35 home runs, granted, but again, it's still, this is a guy that was drafted in the 9th round. And Dan, this might be a name. I'll throw it back to you. Maybe you may. I've thrown this name around quite a bit. So, do you remember the great Scott Eldred?
Oh gosh, yeah. I used to get him confused with Cal Eldred all the time. But yeah, Scott Eldred. Yeah, it's been a minute, but yeah, of course.
That was the last left-hander that the Tigers drafted beyond the first 5 rounds of the draft, and he was drafted. I want to say, I used to know this off the top of my head, but he was the last Tiger to make a start in that. And then you had the Kurt Knudsen too, right? Chris, what was that stat you pulled up? That was a good one too.
Oh boy, that was because we were talking about Bo Brisky, like you mentioned, these late round pitchers. We were looking for a pitcher who made multiple starts or like 5 starts in the big leagues after being drafted in the, 20th round or later. And you had to go back to 1987 or 1989, I think, to find somebody who'd done that. And it certainly looks like Bo Brisky's got a good chance to, stop that streak, as it were. So yeah, it's definitely, things definitely feel better. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Dan, where a lot of it kind of trickled down last year from the big leagues where you saw this progress. And then as we kept following the minors all year long, we're like, oh boy, not just Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green, but Ryan Kreidler from out of nowhere and Bo Brisky from out of nowhere. And suddenly like, hey, this team can develop players for the first time that we can remember.
I mean, and think about it. Now you can go sign a Javier Baez, and guess what? If anything happens to him, you've got a viable replacement. I've been trying to tell Lynn Henning about this over and over, and he just won't listen. You need major league players to help grow future major league players. Get him in here.
Well, and Lynn did just write an article. I didn't see it because I don't have access, but he wrote an article about how the depth in the farm system should be better than in a long time this year. So,
well, you mentioned it too. You already talked about like signing the guys who are going to play at AA, AAA, and yeah, it probably pushes guys down to West Michigan now more than it ever has because West Michigan being a high A affiliate, but it also gives some of the prospects a little bit more time to grow. I think about a guy like Gage Workman, and I'll tell you this, he was one of my favorites to watch last year. I think, and it's appropriate now because there's so many LA Dodgers influencers now in this Tiger system. But every time I watched him, all I could say was he's a Los Angeles Dodgers prospect that somehow ended up in the Tiger system. He hits the tar out of the baseball. He can play defensively. He strikes out a lot. He can run. He's got that power speed combo that you see loaded up in farm systems like LA, like Tampa. We're talking about some of the premier farm systems. And I truly hope that continues to be not just an expectation, but almost a requirement for the skill sets that they continue to bring in amongst position players.
And I remember last year when we went to the game and he made that play from shortstop and Lansing. And Dan, your call. I mean, I was in the Chris was in the booth.
What about Chris's call though? That was the best part of that.
I gotta find the audio.
Wow.
I was gonna say I gotta find the audio and put it in the show introduction. But
CB really sold it that night.
Yeah, but I hear Dan. So Jesse's booth was right next to Jesse Goldsman, the voice of the Lansing Lugnuts, and I hear your voice, Dan. I mean, like you're just like stunned, and it was a thing where Workman is moving to a new position. This is the first time he's playing a new position like this, and then there was a home run call too. You had where you see him drop his hands, balls coming in. Right on the left or right, drops right near his knees on the left hand in the left corner and just drops, boom. And one of the longest home runs you've seen in September and in West Michigan history. You were telling Chris about that. To me, from seeing him from Lakeland, where he just kind of had the jitters, but he's still hitting with everywhere to the end of the season, it was to have an infielder prospect like that. I haven't seen like that in quite a long time in a recently drafted player like Workman.
Look, I am not a professional talent evaluator, and nor will I ever pretend to be one. But what I can tell you is what matters to me, having watched now hundreds of people come through West Michigan, is what's your range of outcomes? When you hit a baseball in a game, how far can it go? When you have a ground ball to your position, what's the best play you can make? Because now I know what you're capable of. Gage Workman is the guy who can make a stunning defensive play. Gage Workman is the guy that can hit a ball 450 feet. I know that's in the package. So to me, that's what makes Gage Workman really compelling. That's why, to me, the Tigers are going to graduate Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green hopefully within the next couple of months from their prospect status, right? And I think if you're looking for that next tier, that next wave, obviously Dylan Dingler is somebody that you hope is in there as well. But I think Gage Workman works his way in there. And even if they don't cut down on the strikeouts, I do not care. Swing hard in case you hit it. This is the time, day, and age that we live in. Hit balls far. Pedro Serrano style. That's Gage Workman.
Yeah, look at this drop. We're watching here on YouTube. Look at the way he dropped his hand on that one right there. It's crazy. Just crushing it.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the play in Lansing, the defensive play was probably the best individual defensive play I saw all year, at least in person. Yeah, I'm sure there's some, good stuff, at least in the minors. And the home run, I think, Roger, talking about was at LMCU. And I don't know if it cleared or landed on the party porch out there, but it was just a monster blast. And it's like, to your point, Dan, yeah, like this is a guy who's got those tools in there. And the one thing I always try to point out is he was among the minor league leaders in doubles this year. Like he was second or third. And the old adage is that, as you get bigger and stronger, those doubles start turning into home runs. And we see that a lot of times too, when guys actually move from the spacious parks in low A and high A and move into the the double A and triple A, where the parks are a little bit more reasonable. So it wouldn't shock me if Workman, I don't know if he's going to start in double A, but if he's in double A this year and hits like 15 home runs there, because he's got the power and the ability. So
you know what doubles turn into at Comerica Park? Triples.
Yeah. Well, and he can run. Like you said, so
that's a valuable tool. And again, he's got enough juice on the base paths to where he can turn a double into a triple, where he has that ability. And again, complete baseball player. Like this is what I've been just aching to see as the archetype for Tigers prospect. They didn't have this for years on years on years. Like, when Dave Dombrowski was in charge, they're essentially the draft was a tool for them to go use those particular draft picks to trade away to help the major league club. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I know that my boss wants me to take a guy who I know is going to dominate low A, I'm probably going to take a much more finished product with a much lower ceiling than I am going to take a guy that has room for projection. And that was the mode of operation for many, many years. It's different now.
Speaking of what's different is we've had Jeff Pontus over from Baseball America on. We've had Kevin Goldstein from Fangraphs, and one pitcher has come up each and every single time. And I'm not sure if you've heard anything on your end, and it's just becoming a thing where it's almost like it's become a running thing on the podcast since December. And that is Tanner Kohlhepp, who both Jeff and Kevin both spoke really highly of. They were just saying how this guy's don't sleep on this guy. And Dan, have you have any intel on him? Because I know he went to Notre Dame, which is not too far. It's a little not too bad a drive from Grand Rapids, but just everyone keeps talking about him. So have you seen him pitch, or have you heard anything? And is he a potential have a chance to pitch out of the bullpen at West Michigan to begin the season?
Yeah. So, essentially was a reliever at Notre Dame, misses a ton of bats. Super high spin rate is, I think, a safe bet. I have not seen those analytics on him yet. I can't wait, because I know the type of player that the Tigers are now looking for. So I wouldn't be surprised even in the slightest. Heck, their 30th round picks are spinning sliders at 3,000 RPMs now, right? So I really like that they took a guy like this. Whether he's a closer, he's polished enough to where he could probably go to West Michigan right out of the box. And it's so different now. I think last year really changed the dynamics of the minor league ladder, because we used to say, okay, draft pick, well, congratulations, you're going to the Gulf Coast League. Like, really? Like, does a 4-year college kid need to go to the GCL? No. So now, we saw Spencer Torkelson, we saw Dylan Dingler, we saw Trey Cruz. We saw Daniel Cabrera without a lick of professional experience go right to West Mich. And I know that it would have probably happened differently had we not been in a unique situation because of the agreements with major and minor league baseball. But I think it just simply showed that you don't need all those levels. You don't need, if a guy's good, a guy's good. You don't need to mess around and send them to 9 different stops. So, whether it's Jackson Jobe, and I think it'd be aggressive to send him to West Michigan, but I would love to see it. If they think he's good enough, I trust them at this point with pitching. We can get into that in a minute. But whether it's Jobe or Madden or Dylan Smith, I think it's been proven here now that you don't need to be afraid to send a guy aggressively through your system.
Yeah, and we trust that if Jackson Jobe does get called up to West Michigan at some point, we'll get a cryptic tweet and maybe a picture of the city of Jackson, Michigan, and that will let us know that we need to start driving.
The bat signal out there.
Yeah. But
if you ever see me tweet that scene from I Love You, Man, where Paul Rudd just butchers the nickname, he's like, "You got it, Jobin." If you ever see me tweet that with no other comments necessary, Just know that that's the bat signal. Can we all just understand each other?
Yeah.
So one thing, we actually had a couple of questions, people asking who you think is going to be there in West Michigan this year. But you kind of mentioned earlier about this could be a pitching rotation or staff that rivals 2014 into 2017. So just for people who might not be super familiar, I'm going to run down some of the names from those teams. And the 2014 team had basically every draft pick from the 2013 draft. So you had Kevin Zomek, Austin Kubica, Chad Green, Buck Farmer, Jonathan Crawford. But just counting the major leaguers, you got Green, Farmer. I think Joe Mantiply made it, or Mantiply eventually made it to the majors.
Yeah.
Zach Reininger, Artie Loki, and I think that's it from that year's class. But the
think about all those names too. All these guys who can go dominate low A, who you can flip away in a trade. And that's exactly what they were trying to do at that point in time. They were competing up through 2016. That was how the Tigers were constructed. And now they don't have guys quite like that anymore. They have talented guys, don't get me wrong, but they don't have guys who you just think, oh, hopefully they'll do well at low A, and then we'll see what happens. Like, I have expectations for these guys now more than I used to.
Yeah, I was the 2017 team, which I don't remember as well or as famously as the 2014 rotation, but it had more big leaguers on there, eventual big leaguers. Anthony Castro, Gregory Soto, Spencer Watkins made the majors last year. Hal Funkhauser was there for 7 starts. Matt Manning for 5. Locke St. John made the majors. Brandon Sittinger made the majors. Brian Garcia, Jason Foley, Eduardo Jimenez, John Schreiber. That's a lot of future big leaguers for a low A team, and now you're in high A. So, and there are a lot of options.
You're lucky to get 5. That's the usual going rate. You're lucky over the course of a full season, and guys change in and out, to get 5 big leaguers, guys who will be there at any point. You just named off, 16, 17 different guys. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, and it appears, as you mentioned, that this year's group, just based on who the Tigers drafted last year and some of the pitchers that showed signs at the beginning of last year as well, that this year could compete. And so that was a couple questions we got. We got one from Michael Meyer, Kaiser343. He said, ask Dan his thoughts on who starts in West Michigan for 2022. Does he see any surprises? And then West Michigan Tigers fan at Cool Guy Burner, he said, who starts the 2022 in the West Michigan rotation? Plenty of options like Madden, Dylan Smith, Cole Hepp, Montero, Wilkel Hernandez, Jack O'Loughlin, Wilmer Flores, and more. So yeah, these guys want to know who you think is going to be there.
Also, he likes I like the John Valenti question too, or guy, or maybe someone that paid more attention to.
Oh, don't worry. There's always time for Johnny Valenti. So you're talking about who starts in West Michigan. I mean, if we're talking about the rotation, I mean, and this is why it's so exciting, is that not only do they have guys that are compelling, but they have many of them. I mean, it's not just for people like us. I mean, we're going to get to a point at some time during this summer where the rotation could conceivably have the Tigers' first, second, third, fourth round draft pick in its rotation, as its rotation. And then on top of that, you've got the Wilmer Floreses of the world, who I know they are extremely excited about. I would expect another year for Cater Montero. Cater Montero was very, very young to be in high A. Again, another guy who skipped low A altogether, going back to 2021. So I think Montero will repeat the level, at least to start the year. I really like Jack O'Loughlin. I think there's something there. I didn't see enough to be completely convicted on that, but really, really smart kid, really gets it, knows his limitations, and understands that he needs to outthink a lot of guys. But I think there's still some projection there because he was still coming off of Tommy John surgery a couple of years back. So, you slowly work your way back in situations like his. So I like O'Loughlin. I was reading Lynn Henning's article, and he talked about Wilkel Hernandez, who is pretty easy to have forgotten just because we hadn't seen him last year. And he was convinced that Hernandez would be a reliever. I tend to agree with that. I think after you go through something like a major, operation like Tommy John, sometimes they try to take a little bit more off the elbow and maybe just focus on short spurts as opposed to getting him back in. And maybe that's one of the reasons he had to get it. Maybe they realize, hey, you know what, maybe the starting is not for him. And I've seen enough Will Kell to know that his first inning or two always looked great. It's when he started to allow guys to get on base, things would snowball against him. So, you know, there's more development that needs to happen there. He's not going to come into clean innings all day as a reliever. He's going to have to come in and get big outs in tough spots. So, you know, there's projection that needs to happen there. But I think those are the guys that you probably start with. But yeah, Cole Hep will probably be a closer. I could easily see that. And then Flores, Madden, Job. I mean, it's a fun setup. But O'Loughlin for me, I mean, I saw enough to be excited about him next year.
Yeah, and I bring up on the screen here for everybody who's watching on YouTube, and we'll put the YouTube link in here tomorrow. Look at his curveball percentage, his whip percentage is 54%, which stands out because you were talking about how you had to outthink people, Dan. You set up a batter with a fastball, with a changeup, but that curveball percentage, I mean, that stands out. And this is a guy coming off surgery, so these numbers here are going to get better. But if you're referring to his curveball, that it was something that I saw in Lakeland a bit, and you gotta be encouraged with this here.
You know, I usually see this profile with like straight junk ballers or like guys who are lucky to top 90, and he can top that. I mean, he can get it to 92, 93. I mean, I know he has. I know we didn't see it a whole lot, but do we have? I'm trying to see. So Max Velo, 93 on a sinker, 92 on his four-seamer, which he's throwing a breaking ball 89% of the time. So, yeah, I mean, look, if you can still hum it in there at 92, 93 miles per hour, and I think he can probably add a little bit more as he continues to get stronger and he rehabs. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who is thinking at a higher level than he's going to be playing at this year.
And one of the things that I'm kind of interested in seeing, and this will, it all play out the way it plays out, but back in that 2014 class, they had Chad Green made the rotation, and he was like an 11th round pick. And I remember back then I was working at Tigstown. I don't think we ranked him in our top 50 once. He was just like, oh, he's just a guy. And, he's been the most successful player from that draft. And we look at the guys the Tigers drafted in the top 5 rounds last year. You mentioned Madison Smith, Madden Job, but they took 3 other arms in 8th, 9th, 10th round, and Brant Herter, and was it Garrett Burhin from Ohio State, and that Jordan Marks, I think from, Alabama, it was Carolina, upstate or something like that. It wouldn't shock me if one of those guys ends up in the rotation and ends up being better than somebody they drafted higher. It's, they gave themselves a bunch of bullets.
Who's the like 7 foot, 350-pound pitcher that they took? Like,
is that RJ Pettit? Is that RJ Pettit?
It's RJ Pettit. That's right. He finished the season with West Michigan. I was very excited about him. I just want to see a dude that big throw baseballs. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun group, and you just mentioned all that depth, and that's why that matters, is because as the season progresses, sometimes when, look at last year, you started with Spencer Torkelson and Dylan Dingler. And then once those 2 guys walked out the door, we kind of felt like Will Smith in the middle of that living room, just looking around. Right. So, that now this year you get Job, you get Madden. And if they look like what we expect them to look like, they're probably not there that long. Maybe they don't even last half the season. I mean, Spencer Torkelson went from having no professional baseball experience to within 100 games playing in AAA. So I know he's a special case, but they're clearly showing they're not afraid to move guys. So when they do move the Jobs and the Maddens of the world, what's going to be interesting? And you just named some of the guys that are going to be that guy. Like, we had to think about what is Gage Workman going to look like? He's not going to start the season with us, but he'll probably be there at the end. So we kind of want to see what the end looks like just as much as the beginning.
And there's one name too that comes up on that draft last year that did perform well in rookie ball and ended up going to Lakeland for a while, and that was the 12th round draft pick out of Duke and catcher Mike Rothenberg. Did I say that correctly? Hopefully I did.
You did.
Okay. So for me, I see him being the full-time catcher at West Michigan, because just based off his offensive profile, there was already reviews about him being a good clubhouse guy and being kind of a leader. for a staff last year. Lakeland went through, it seemed like everybody underneath the sun to pitch, and he stepped in right away after the draft, was able to hit 280. I mean, again, small sample size, of course, in 24 games, but 263 OPS, or with an OPS of 768. Hey, this is a guy who was able to get 14 walks and 17 strikeouts. I'll take that any day of the week.
Look, nobody's putting me in charge of running a baseball team, and that's a good idea. But I can say this. If I'm putting together my ideal type of lineup of fielding the kind of team I want, I do not care about offense from the catching position. I think it is completely unnecessary. If you do have a guy who can pop a ball over the fence and hit you 190 to 200, great. That's awesome. What the Tigers got from Eric Haas last season was just absurd about how rare it was. People don't understand. We don't appreciate what Eric Haas did last year. I digress. What you need at every level is a guy who can be the backbone of your pitching staff. That is so much more important than hitting a couple extra home runs every year. It's why Wilson Ramos was leading Major League Baseball in home runs after 2 weeks and then was DFA'd 4 weeks later. It just goes to show that you need somebody who can block every ball, is on the same page with every pitcher he has, can steal you strikes, can control the run game. That, to me, is a pitch in and pitch out. Every single moment of a game goes through how apt your catcher is defensively. So for me, give me the best defensive catcher I can possibly find. I do not care what he does offensively.
Yes. So in my mind, I would picture them wanting Cooper Johnson to work with all those young pitchers next year.
Love me some Cooper Johnson.
Now, yeah, Cooper Johnson, we joked before, he's one of the most agile catchers I've ever seen behind the plate. He's just slipping and sliding all over the place like he's on ice. But yeah, great receiver. But I could see Rothenberg is an interesting guy because as I remember, him coming out of the draft, there were some questions about his flexibility, and he's a bigger dude. I could see him catching 30-40% of the time, and also playing a fair amount of first base, just because he's a switch hitter. He's got some pop. Get him in the lineup, get him some at bats, while also getting them some catching to see if it'll stick. But that's just me spitballing right now.
Yeah, I mean, any catcher that can provide offense, to me, is a white whale, because there's just so few of them. They're just not spotted very often. I mean, we're right now the prospect rankings are coming out just about everywhere, and everyone and their brother has Adley Rutschman as the number one consensus prospect. But how many times has a catcher led his team, let alone Major League Baseball, in any particular offensive category? It's really hard. Managers don't go to their catcher and say, hey, I hope you go 3 for 4 today with 2 bombs. It's no. I hope you help our pitcher catch 7 innings of 1-run ball and strike out 9. That's what managers care about. And as their progression develops, they don't care nearly as much about what they're doing offensively, because they know that they can impact the game defensively a million times more. So for me, I don't think Adley Rutschman, and we already saw this many years ago with a guy named Matt Wieters, is that, yeah, he might be good defensively, but we're putting a lot of stock into a bat for a kid who's going to be under the physical punishment of playing the catcher position. We saw with Alex Avila many, many years ago is that it's hard to maintain an elite level of offensive production when you're behind the plate, getting balls in the dirt, getting bruises on your chest, getting foul tips off the face mask day in and day out. I don't think it's fair to Adley Rutschman to expect him to be a 30 and 100 guy when that's the position they have him at. Joe Mauer was rarely that. I mean, he was good, don't get me wrong, but for every one Joe Mauer, there's 500. I don't want to say a guy's name that I'm going to regret here, but you get what I'm saying.
I mean, you can see Raul Casanova. You can say there's a name that's a sore spot with some people, but more importantly, I look at something like I look at Buster Posey, who had a severe injury, was able to come back, and then he goes, you know what? I'm good, because he knew full well the guy was a warrior behind the plate. He was cerebral. He understood the game, and he was able to provide that rare punch. I mean, it wasn't a big power. Did he get 30 home runs? I'm trying to remember if he.
I think Posey hit 30 once, probably in the year he won MVP.
Yeah, but he was consistent. But that after that injury he had, where I mean, it was bad, and he couldn't, obviously no DH in the NL, and so he decided to call it a day. And that says something about the catching position, especially for the Tigers too, who, if you think about all the great Tiger catchers, Lance Parrish was a power hitter. You had Matt Noakes in his rookie season when he almost won Rookie of the Year. Mickey Talenton. Then Pudge when he signed with the Tigers. We've been, and look at, and even go back further, Bill Freehan. Tiger fans are spoiled with catchers. If you think about it, and you know I'm right about this, because we're looking for the next Mickey Talenton and his swing. We're looking for the next Matt Noakes. I mean, Eric Haas's season last year was eerily similar to Matt Noakes. He was almost on pace to break his rookie home run record. So, I mean, if you want to go back even further for the old timers out there, because Chris and I were talking about this earlier. Yes, Charlie Granger, or the Mechanical Man. Yes, he was a great catcher too. Or was it Mickey Cochran?
Mickey Cochran.
Yeah, Mickey Cochran. Mickey Cochran. Yes. Sorry, folks. Before I forget, you can yell that. Or if you want me to make a Ray Boone reference, fine too. But anyway.
So to that point, Buster Posey topped out at 24 home runs in his MVP season, but he hit 336. But to Dan's point, there's so much to catching that's not measurable, and they've done a better job of measuring, catching framing and stuff like that. But so much of it is about their relationship with the pitchers and how comfortable the pitchers feel. And that's why like Salvador Perez doesn't ever grade out very well on defense, but pitchers love throwing to him, and he hit 40 whatever home runs last year. Like, he provides a lot of value. And I was just thinking, you got a manager there in West Michigan who spent 11 years in the big leagues while hitting 260 with 23 home runs in his career, but he stuck around forever because he was a good catcher.
There's a premium on it. And to Roger, to your point, I mean, yeah, we're spoiled in this town, this fan base, as it pertains to catchers. I mean, look, there's a reason that, your mom's favorite player is a catcher on the Tigers, because I think at least it wasn't my house. It was Mickey Pendleton. It was Brandon Edge. Anyway, I digress. But I mean, it's something that we always had. The Tigers have always had it, and they've always had it in a strong way. In today's economics, you can't necessarily, I mean, and Jim Leland said this too, you can't have an all-star at every position, right? So you have to find ways to combine multiple players into your position. So what did the Tigers do at catcher last season offensively? And this is why they won 75, 76 games last year, is because they got so much offense from that position. I think from their catching position, they got upwards of 40 homers. I would venture to guess that other than maybe Kansas City, to your point about Sal Perez, I don't know many teams that got 40 home runs from their catching position last year. I mean, Salvador Perez, we were talking about Johnny Bench when he was doing what he did. Think about how far back that goes. So, to that point, I think, Adley Rutschman, if he does what Buster Posey did, he'll be a huge success. But because he's the number one prospect in baseball, because he was the number one overall pick, he is very, very much set up to fail.
Yeah, we had a question in there, by the way, in our YouTube chat from Troy. We did mention Pudge, by the way, during the conversation, and we're talking about the kind of catchers in the past. But Troy asked this question: is Barnhart and Haas the best catching duo in baseball?
You definitely get a little bit of both. Chris, what do you have?
I would have to go through and think about all the best catchers in baseball that would sprung up on me. I would say probably not. We don't, for as good as Haas was last year, he cooled off a little bit. I think once teams figured out how to pitch to him a little bit more. I do think it's an ideal platoon situation where Barnhart gets right-handed pitching and then Haas gets in there and gets the mash lefties. But yeah, I'd have to go through and look. But I was just looking to what you said, Dan. Yeah, Kansas City led baseball with 49 home runs from catchers last year. The Tigers were second with 41. And that was like with random explosions from Dustin Garneau, and Jake Rogers was hitting well before he went down with an injury. And like you said, Ramos was hitting for power. So yeah, I'd have to look. It's hard for me to think about who top catchers in baseball are right now.
I would venture to say this. I would say that last year, the Tigers probably had the highest WAR, lowest budget catching platoon in baseball. And
absolutely.
that's so important. I mean, you have to find it. You have to find it. You know, we were just talking about Robbie Grossman, right? And so we talked about how great he was. But if you mix together what Eric Haas did with what Jake Rogers did, with what Wilson Ramos did for a couple of weeks, and what Dustin Garneau did, I mean, you combine that together, you've got a really great ball player. I don't know what that combines to look like, but I would guess that it is so much more valuable than what they were paying for those 4 players.
And the fact too that the Tigers are building up minor league catching depth too, where you look at Dingler last year, kind of you could tell maybe he was playing hurt a little bit. We got the Erie, so there's a lot to that, and you hope that and Troy brings up a good point that you hope he can replicate that, and it's totally feasible. And it's just that's where it's nice to see that. But then addressing the backup catching concerns so that maybe they're not putting so much pressure on Dingler. And one last question in terms of catcher, Alfonso last year started the season in West Michigan. He struggled, went down to Lakeland, came back night and day. And when we saw him early on in the season behind the plate, teams were running all over him, as I recall, Dan. And when he got back, it seemed like he was a much different player.
Brian Pena was more intrigued by Eliezer Alfonso than almost any player he had. And it's probably because of his catching background. But Alfonso, I mean, switch hitting catchers are hard to find. Good switching, catchers are even harder. But as the season progressed with Alfonso, the one thing he always could do was make contact. And I always love that ability. I know that you want hard contact in today's game. But again, it's the catcher position. So I treat that a little bit different from an offensive profile than I say would for a shortstop or for a third baseman. For a catcher, yeah, if I don't expect a lot of offense from you, if you can be a guy who doesn't strike out that much, and if I have a guy on third with nobody out, with 1 out, and you can put the ball in play to get him home, that to me is valuable. That is the kind of stuff that I need from a position I don't prioritize the offense. So Alfonso wasn't doing much of anything in terms of driving the baseball, but he was putting it in play, and he couldn't hit a home run to save his life. Then he goes down to Lakeland. He finds that ability, comes back to West Michigan, and again, it just wasn't there for him in the power standpoint. I think he did hit a homer in his last at-bat of the year off of shortstop who was in there pitching. But he was hitting the tar out of balls when he came back. He was hitting them to the gaps. He was hitting them down the lines. He came back with much more authority as an offensive player. And I don't know. I mean, defensively, he was rough around the edges. He had a hard year from a defensive standpoint. So I don't know what that means for him long term. But I'm excited whenever I watch somebody come back and show that they figured something out. I would expect him to start next season in West Michigan. Him and Rothenberg would be my guess.
All right, Chris, was there anything else you wanted to?
No, just Alfonso is one of those rare, interesting cases where we don't care about offense from a catcher, but he's a guy who probably can't really play anywhere else. Like he's shorter, he's not going to be a great first baseman, but there's just enough potential as a catcher that like you stick around with him for a couple of years. And as Dan said, he has some of the better at bats in the entire system. He's just got great bat control and can put the bat on the ball and has a good eye. So it's like, well, this is a situation where the guy's offensive ability is interesting enough to keep him at catcher because there's nothing else to do with him. And he's still young. I think but it might be 23 now.
He's young enough to continue giving the opportunity to. I think he might be younger than that, but he had a knack to get on base. He had a knack to drive the ball towards the end of his time. The catching position's hard. I mean, it is really, really hard to learn the nuances of that game at that position. I mean, there's a reason that catchers become managers because they have to think out the game in its totality, as opposed to a first baseman who just has to look and go, oh, there's a ground ball, I probably should go cover the bag. Like, I mean, it's very different skill set. You have to be responsible for so much back there. It's overwhelming. And for somebody like Alfonso, who didn't have a lot of experience past, rookie ball, to come to high A as well, that's a big adjustment. So, there's a reason catchers usually take a longer time to develop. Jake Rogers was the same way too. It took him a long time to make the major leagues because there's a lot of nuance that comes along with it. So yeah, he's absolutely worth being patient on.
Yeah, I just looked. He's 22.
He's 22. That's it. Wow. That was, for one reason, I thought he was a little older than that. So, all right, Dan. Before we let you go,
are we done? We're not
okay.
finished,
right?
Right?
If you want to keep going, all right, we can keep going. We can do late night with late night with Hasty.
My daughter's she's asleep, so I don't really have anything to worry about.
Oh,
here.
okay. She's knocked out. Okay.
Yeah, she's listening to the podcast, so she's
we know you had a road trip, so I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but we could definitely do. Chris, was there anything else you want to hit on? Because I could definitely.
We did. There were a couple other questions. I don't know if we want to pose them.
Keep going with those through there. That's my fault. Do you want me to go ahead and share them again?
Bring the questions. Let's go.
So, Cool Guy Burner again. He said the Whitecap most likely to put themselves back on the prospect map in 2022 between Trey Cruz, Winsel Perez, and Parker Meadows.
So for me, I want it to be Parker Meadows, for the record. I want it to be Meadows because, they invested a lot in him. He is, he's somebody that they thought a lot of all those years ago. And it's crazy because when you make this flip from low to high A, guys are seemingly with your team for what feels like an eternity. I mean, we've had guys for 4 or 5 seasons, right? And I would assume, and I could be wrong, but I think Parker Meadows will probably come back to West Michigan to start 2022, which would be his 4th season in West Michigan, albeit 2 of those were low A, 2 of them are now high A. So, we've done nothing but seen his growing pains. We've seen just him have to go through the absolute ringer. So if it's gonna click, and I will say, he puts a lot of time in. He puts a lot of time in the weight room. He puts a lot of time in to his physical development. He's turning in to the guy I think the Tigers thought he would turn into physically, but being a big dude and being a great baseball player are 2 different things. So I hope it clicks for him. For me, I'm still not ready to give up on Cruz. I like Cruz because I didn't see a whole lot from him last year, but I liked the few things that I did see. I liked his plate discipline. I like his ability to switch hit. I think those traits can sometimes straighten themselves out over time. So Cruz, he did struggle as a defensive player, which was tough to watch. But I still like him as an offensive profile. Again, we are really, really, it's easy to be hard on these guys because they literally just got assigned to high A without a lick of professional experience. And Cruz should have been a guy that started lower, but just with the way everything's set up, West Michigan was the spot. He should have started at a lower spot, and I think he probably would be with West Michigan at some point this season. But I like him. I think he's got enough juice to at least keep things interesting for a little bit longer.
I think we only saw Cruz a couple times last year. He seemed like he was struggling with injury a lot during the season.
He messed up his shoulder like the first week of the season, and then he was just never the same. He even told me, he's like, I don't feel normal swinging the bat. I don't feel comfortable swinging the bat, and that doesn't matter what side I'm on. He actually told me this. He said he was more comfortable as a right-handed hitter based on his shoulder situation, but he's not a dominant right-handed hitter. He's a dominant left-handed hitter. So imagine that the only side you feel comfortable swinging from is your non-dominant side. Yeah, you're not going to hit that particular season if you're set up like that from a physicality and from a health standpoint.
Yeah, especially because he played in the Constellation League that summer before the season and during 2020 when they didn't have the minor leagues. He came right out of college and played there. I think he played with Cody Clemens. I'm pretty sure it was on his team. So yeah, he was going up against guys who were in AA, AAA, and I thought that I'll be honest, I thought the High Michigan assignment was fine for him based off his experience, but with the shoulder injury, that has a new element to it because in terms of defense, you can even tell there's something didn't seem right, but I'm just an amateur guy calling it out, but I still think that there's a lot of potential there considering his range. He's very fluid in the infield too, as well.
One's an accident, two's a trend, three's a problem, right? So we're not going to hold Trey Cruz to the same expectations that we keep Spencer Torkelson to, right? So we're going to make sure that, anybody who's, different or I should say unique, yeah, we might feel differently about what they need to do. When Spencer Torkelson was, I think, 0 for his first 30 with about 19 strikeouts. Yeah, I'm sure there were some sweaty palms over there in Detroit. But, again, still, you expect those guys to hit the ground running. And Cruz was much more of a developmental side kind of guy. I mean, he was, a good college player, don't get me wrong. But you can't expect that kind of production from guys who aren't elite players. So, yeah, I think if it happens again, then we start to change our expectations.
Troy had another question in the chat room. Can we expect more signings after the lockout? To answer the question, I expect another pitcher. I expect a lefty reliever. They really need another lefty reliever, or just maybe like a long relief too would be ideal. But another bat would be.
Can I please get a good reliever? I would just like a reliever. I don't really care what sign he throws from. Look, I love that, by the way. AJ Hinch even said that like a couple weeks ago. He's just like, look, if I don't have a lefty in the bullpen, then so be it. I can find righties that get lefties out. So, give me a good pitcher over a certain side pitcher. I saw Andrew Chafin was a guy that they were linked to for a while. I like him. But if they don't get anybody, it's okay. Like, I don't worry about it as much. Like, I used to worry about that stuff. Like, what's the Tiger bullpen going to do to crush our hopes and dreams, right? Like, I don't worry about that as much with this particular group leading that charge. So, I think if they need something, they'll go find it. But I don't think it's going to cost them an arm and a leg to do
it. If I'm not mistaken, their 40-man roster is at 38 right now, which means that, yeah, they've got room to add 2 more players. But presumably when the lockout ends, spring training will come very quickly after that. And when spring training begins, you can put guys on the 60-day injured list. And the Tigers will put Jake Rogers on there and Spencer Turnbull. So they can presumably add another 3-4 guys if they want to. And I would expect them to add at least 2. Raj touched on it. I think it's going to be pitching for the most part. Possibly an outfielder if they get crazy. In a good way.
I would like to get a veteran bat. Like Michael Confoglio is another bat. Left-handed bat, I think, would be nice. But I don't know. Like the outfield, the one thing, Dan, I'll ask you about this is the Tigers outfield situation. Riley Green, by the way, it was the joke it was a really funny comment that Kevin Goldstein said that kind of, I think you'll appreciate this in terms of prospect rankings. Him and Torkelson, 1 or 2, doesn't matter. No, it doesn't. And so, but as far as Riley Green's concerned, whether it makes a team out of spring training or not, you look at an outfield situation, you're the Grossman Stan, so we understand that. You have Akil Baddoo, who's expected to hopefully break out of that sophomore slump. But then after that, it just seems like with Victor Reyes is Victor Reyes, essentially a 4th outfielder, and that's fine. He's good. He's a good player in terms of a good clubhouse guy. Nothing wrong with that. But do you think the Tigers need to get another outfielder, like a veteran outfielder, to kind of hold the position together? Because while Riley Green we know is going to be a good talent, there's no guarantee he's going to come out for 60 games and go fine. I don't know. Do the Tigers go ahead and add another veteran to the mix?
Well, as much as I like Robbie Grossman, look, you have to know what limitations look like, right? You have to know that, he's 32 years old. So, while super helpful and very productive for what his skill set allows, he's probably going to have a hard time being a part of this 3, 5, 7 years from now. So, yeah, I mean, is he holding it down exceptionally well? In my opinion, yes, especially for what he makes. So I think, yes, they're going to need at some point to hit the switch to get not just a veteran outfielder, but a good one. I mean, I don't bank on Akil Baddoo being a transcendent player. I'd love to see it, but again, I don't want to put these young players in positions where we have to expect that much from them. See Ryan Kreidler. I want to put these kids into spots where if they hit, it's a huge bonus. It's house money because there's already an answer that's established, that's a bona fide producer at the major league level playing in front of them. And you know this as well as anybody. You don't finish the year with the team you go to opening day with. You never do. Look, Javi Baez is going to be a Tiger this year, but I would bet my house that Ryan Kreidler will also be a Tiger this year. There's no reason why he won't get an opportunity, whether that's playing second base, whether that's playing third base because one of those two players went down, or playing shortstop for whatever reason if Javi Baez isn't out there. So there's a scenario where you are leaning on young players, and the Tigers have themselves in a spot where they have some good ones. So, no, I don't want to put it on Akil Baddoo that he has to be this, Mark the Bird Fidret style sensation for the next 10 years of his major league career. It's not fair. So, no, at some point, they're going to have to go get a premium player in the outfield to flank Riley Green. And then honestly, if you want to throw a center fielder out there, let's say Riley's a center fielder, hypothetically, then you go get a great bat from one of the corners or just somebody who can just really run it down. I'm fine either way, like a Kiermaier, somebody along those lines, right? So if you get something like that, you can win with that. But they're going to need a bona fide big bat because they're closer than they have been in a lot of years, right? The idea of Green and Torkelson and I don't know, Scope, Candelario. I mean, but they're still maybe a bat or two away from having us go like, oh man, that's a good lineup. Even with Baez, like they're getting closer, but they're not there yet. So I think they need a couple still to really make them go from being a playoff hopeful to being a team you wouldn't want to play in the playoffs.
Works for me.
Yeah, I can take that all day of the week. I mean, it's just, I just when I see people say the fans like, well, they have these fourth outfielders, but it's a lot. It's not fair at all to expect just those kind of performances because even with we're gonna see different next year pitching coming back. And in terms of you have a long layoff here right now between the lockout season. So who knows what pitchers are going to be, what the pitchers are doing in their off time right now. Last year, we saw some of the injuries as a result of that. But this year, Chris, I mean, let me ask you this real quick. Do you think, are baseball pitchers getting back to kind of a normal, I guess, off-season regimen? And is that could make a difference too?
Yeah, I assume that they're all pretty much back into the swing of things after last year. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, guys who were injured or missed time. But the one thing about pitching is you don't necessarily you just need to find somebody who can catch the ball for you. You can get out there and throw and work up your arm strength and things like that. It's another thing as a hitter to be able to face legitimate pitching. I mean, I guess if you have a pitching machine, you're halfway there. But yeah, I don't know. I think hopefully we'll see fewer injuries this year, but it is. You still are dealing with guys coming off maybe throwing 50, 60 innings 2 years ago and jumping up a fair amount last year. So there might be some residual effects. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it's, like I said, it's interesting to see. Hopefully this lockout ends soon, but who knows at this point. But so Dan, you're heading to Pittsburgh. What's the rest of your UAD schedule looking like in terms of how the Titans are doing too? I mean, we talked about this a little bit before off air, but how's the rest of your February lining up?
I do want to see the rest of this year. So right now we're in the middle of what I like to call the kidney stone of our season. So right now we are just sitting here trying to pass it. We are in the middle of a 12-day stretch where we are away for 10 of those days. So of the next 2 weeks, essentially, we're gone every single day. We've got a long road trip, and that was the way that they were at the beginning of the year. But there was still revisits back to Michigan, back to Detroit, back to home, back to everybody's families and all that stuff. But this time we don't get that chance. So right now, this is being what they call in the thick of it. We're in the dog days of snowy Michigan winter that lasts 5 months. So we need to we're at the tail end of the season. So after we get through this and we pass this kidney stone, we'll be all right. Things will get easier. So then comes a bunch of home games, then comes the conference tournament, and then anything happens and you just don't know. I mean, you could find yourself in the NCAA tournament hypothetically, which would be something that I really hope for them, because they've got a young man there in Antoine Davis who's been there for 4 years. Talk about a white whale in college sports right now, right? A 4-year basketball player that's excelled. So there's not many like him, but he's really done a lot of good work, and he's been great for that university. I want nothing more than to see that work rewarded.
I was just thinking about that when you said that, and I go, wait, I also passed a gallbladder stone at your ballpark.
Oh, that's right. Oh, good times, Roger. That's right. Oh, man. There's nothing like baseball season.
They really painted a picture there, guys. Really.
I remember I was in the radio booth. I came out to the press box, and I looked down, and I saw this chalk from where somebody was laying on the floor, and I was like, what happened here? And they're like, oh, Roger had a gallbladder situation. He's at the hospital now. We're not sure if he's going to make it.
That's still thinking, who was it? It was Adam Wolf and some other pitcher. I've forgotten who it was. Helped grab your stuff for me to get to as they chased down the ambulance like a sleazy lawyer.
Shout out to Adam Wolf. PMP right there, PIMP. It was just to do that. But anyway, there's in terms of the minor league schedule, I know that's just as brutal when you have those kind of stretches like that. But I think with the new schedule, how did you enjoy that last year? Real quick, because I was curious to spend that whole time 5 games out there. It seemed like that was a lot easier of a setup, but or am I just imagining that?
So I really think it's so important when you're going through something new or uncharted is to get as many different opinions about it, because if I come out and say what I'd like to say, which is that these schedules are amazing, I think they're incredible. That can be disingenuous to other groups of people. I can guarantee you that is immensely difficult for ballpark employees. If you're playing 6 days in a row, it's really hard to find people who can work 6 days in a row to do things like run a concession stand or run parking, for example. The little things that happen at a ballpark. I know firsthand, having watched it last year, that we had people who were wearing, white collars and ties into the office Monday through Friday, and they were pouring beer at 7:05. So it was very, very challenging in that way. So there are logistics that are extremely difficult. I hope that the gravity of the situation and the focus of a full off season has given us and everybody else, for that matter, because I know this wasn't just a Whitecaps thing. This was all of baseball, given them time to reformulate and to have a new strategy for what is needed in order to make it work. Now they know the demands. Now they know what's going to be necessary in order to have that run more smoothly. So I from what I understand, they're all set and they're all ready to go. But if anybody needs a summer job, I can promise you they're looking. So, but for me, no, I mean, we would go 20 to 30 days without an off day. I mean, before this current setup, I mean, we had, 21, 25 day stretches with no off days in between. So to have one off day every single week, and moreover, to have it on the same day, you can actually like pretend to be a human being once a week. It's great. I mean, it's fun to actually have like a pulse of life, a chance to see your family. I mean, it's great. So yeah, I love the setup. I think it's awesome. I think it gives everybody a chance to recalibrate and come back fresh.
Yeah, remember when Greg talked about that too, Chris? Like just having those, I felt like I had a life for the first time ever. Like he could plan stuff with his wife and everything. And yeah, that's just hearing that and but I didn't think about the concession thing. That's a great point to bring up, Dan, because it's not off. I mean, it last year you can see across the board, no matter what job, it was hard to fill. But I remember it felt like when I went to the games at Lansing and in Grand Rapids that some of the concession stands, even Erie, Chris, some of the concession stands weren't open because they didn't have enough people.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you don't really appreciate as you're a fan. You go there and you expect certain things,
right?
And it's it's hard. I guess I didn't appreciate it either. That the difficulty in staffing all that stuff. But I would also suggest that maybe Nate could do it because I don't know what else he's doing.
Yeah, and Nate would be thrilled. I'm sure he would much more love to help someone's nacho order rather than go call the third, fourth, and fifth inning.
Shout out to Nate, who we enjoy. Yes.
Yeah. Nate, yeah, he's good people. Just you could see him just with the paper hat on, flipping his hat off, just running right back up to the booth and go from there. But yeah, Dan. So anything scheduled coming up for the Road to Detroit podcast before we get out of here? Do you want to plug that? Because fantastic podcast. And
thanks. I appreciate that. So I don't, with a major league lockout looming and the uncertainty as to whether or not we're going to play with major leaguers, at least for the time being, from everything I understand is that minor leaguers, and this can go as high up as the Torkelson and Greens of the world, that they're set. We're going to see those guys play on day one. I think part of it is because even the high-end guys like those two haven't become 40-man rostered yet. So you can see anybody you're really dying to see, you're going to be able to see on day one. So it's kind of nice in that way from a Tigers fan's perspective. I know there's Javi Baez and Rodriguez and all these guys that they signed, but look, you still want to see what your future lineup's going to look like. So I think there's still plans for minor league games to happen down in Lakeland. I don't know how this affects the Road to Detroit podcast so much as it does just the Tigers in general. But I'm hoping that for the first time, the Tigers decide to pull the trigger on broadcasting some of the minor league games on the backfields. If we don't have major league games,
please, yeah.
I mean, yeah, please show me Torkelson and Green, show me Dingler, show me, Cabrera and Meadows and these guys. Because if I don't have anything, at least I have that. Like, at least I have something to watch. In late February, early March, that's the one thing I want to see. So, yeah, I mean, truthfully, when I watch Major League spring training games, I'm just waiting for when the prospects get into those games. So that's a big thing for me. So I know that they have had some discussions about it. Whether it's Major League games that are not on Bally or if they're minor league games from backfields, I think that would be very interesting. And I think there's an appetite for it.
Yeah, trust me, it's one of those things where I think it was in low A only. Was it the Pirates affiliate, Chris? It was the only one that had and all of that division. That was it. And then occasionally I see the Blue Jays affiliate have that weird feed where it looks like it's something out of high school. That from like the
it's
90s.
Just a dad with a camera.
Yeah, just like some sort of weird. Like it looked really weird. And trust me, anything Lakeland would be.
It's Vladimir Guerrero Sr.
I know that Sherry, who listens to us online, Dunedin. Okay, because I was going to say something else, and I remember her yell, "It's Dunedin. How do you not know it's Dunedin?" Because I'm not from Florida. Anyway.
You know, Jesse Goldberg Strassler, the Lansing Lugnuts radio broadcaster, was with the Blue Jays before they became an A's affiliate for many years. And the way he made me remember it, because I'm very much like a memory sensory kind of, give me a word that I can line up to it. Kind of like Michael Scott, my friend Pat took a turn, he said that when you finish your Thanksgiving dinner, you are Dunedin.
That works for me. I always have those little mnemonic devices, I believe they're called. But
that's right.
So, but to your point, Dan, I was like, the Tigers are in kind of a unique spot here. I was just looking at their prospect rankings on Fangraphs, and only one of their top 15 prospects to Fangraphs is actually on the 40-man roster. So they've got all their top prospects are still available to play baseball. And I just wrote an article tonight about there's like this small group of guys who are kind of screwed by this lockout, and they're not the veterans like Baez and Grossman, and they're not the prospects like Green and Torkelson. They're the guys like Cody Clemens, who just got added to the 40-man roster, and Joey Wentz and Alex Faedo and Daz Cameron and Derek Hill, even these young big leaguers who are missing out on another spring training and technically can't be with the Tigers coaching staff and development staff at all. And so however long this goes, they're missing out on real opportunities to prove themselves to be big leaguers. And it's a bummer for those guys.
And think about it, about a year, maybe 2 years ago now. I want to say it's just a year ago, but didn't the Tigers start the season with Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal already having made their major league debuts, but still holding their prospect status? So we still saw prospects who were on the 40-man. And so thankfully we're not in a situation last year like we are this year. At least, I mean, look, there's going to be winners and losers and people who have to figure it out. But, I know how hard you have to work to get to that level. So I can guarantee you that the work continues to get put in. It doesn't fall off. I mean, it's something that analytics has a really hard time quantifying. It's work ethic. And, it doesn't matter what your exit velo is if you don't care. I mean, anybody can show that they can hit the tar out of a baseball, but, if they don't make the team bus and they're always 10 minutes late, or, they're rolling out to batting practice, by the time Group B's done and they haven't shagged anything. Like, it's just little stuff like that. But, like, you have to put the work in. And, like, it sounds so old school baseball. Like, it almost makes me nauseous even saying it. But, like, it is the unquantifiable thing that we need and that teams need to now do their homework on more than anything, because now we have all the numbers available to us, right? So now what's equivalent to a background check is almost just as important as anything else.
Yeah, especially because it might be coming up even in the labor discussions too. They talked about using some sort of baseball set. They're talking about F-WAR at one point. Even was it a combination of both, Chris, they were talking about?
Yeah, using analytics to judge players and stuff, though. But yeah, no, I think, Dan, you're absolutely right. It's the sort of thing that, as fans and as everything leans toward analytics, it kind of forgets the stuff that we can't ever know as fans, and even as people who aren't there in the locker room, how the importance of having good leadership, the importance of having guys who keep the clubhouse loose or know when to really push a guy or know how to get a guy to perform. It's a huge thing. And yeah, it's not great if you got a player whose top exit velocity is leaving the clubhouse after the game. Am I right?
No, I mean, look, that's why Don Kelly was a major leaguer for 10 years. I mean, it's because, when you hear about the guy on the team that everybody loves and everybody pulls for, there's a reason for that. It's not just because he found a click in the locker room and he won over the most important players on the team. It's like, no, like top down, this guy is a hero in that room. And for whatever reason or another, he just has everybody in his corner. And it's why I think Don Kelly will be a major league manager at some point before it's all said and done.
So, Dan, we don't normally do this for our guests, but because you have, you're probably in the 5 or 6 time range guest, we're going to play you off.
Do I get a 5 Timers Club jacket?
Yes, I'm actually stitching it now, but we're actually playing you off a little bit of one of the songs off your favorite album. One of my favorite Queen songs of all time that, for whatever reason, can classic rock do me a favor? Can you play something else other than Champions of the... Hold on, sorry. I descend upon you in the skies. The 7 seas run. Can anybody in classic rock do me a favor and not play We Will Rock You, We Are Champions? Queen has such a back catalog of music. I don't get it. I know that, look, I know radio is something where the Nielsen ratings and market, blah, blah, blah. I know how the radio works behind the sauce, or how they make the sausage radio. But good God, man. How does this song not getting replayed?
I think it was on XM radio about 6 months ago. They did a Queen channel for like a month, and they had guest hosts come in, and I learned, because that's all I listened to for that entire month, was that the Foo Fighters are like Queen stans. Like, they have arguments about it on tour, like about the best like back catalog songs. So yeah, I mean, they took like an hour and they played all like the back channel ones. That was it. But one thing I loved, and Taylor Hawkins is their drummer. He's the one with the blonde hair who's always just it's flailing everywhere. Must be nice to have long hair at that age. So he said, and I agree with him, he said the thing about Queen is that they were always swinging for a home run. And not every band is risky enough to do that. Because, I mean, look, you're filling out a CD or a record with 10, 12, 14 songs. You don't want to go into that thinking that, these ones probably won't be hits. Like, no, like these guys, like every single thing that they put down, like they thought, like, heck, even the songs they didn't even like became #1 hits. Like, they didn't even like Another One Bites the Dust. Like, the drummer thought that song was garbage. And Michael Jackson saw them in concert at the LA Forum and pulled them aside after the show. And he's just like, hey, you've got to put this song out as a single. Like, if you don't, you're going to miss a huge opportunity. And so they like went kicking and screaming, and they're like, fine, we'll put it out. And it literally became their highest selling song of all time.
I did not know that. Really. I had no idea that. Wow.
We could do another hour on this topic alone.
Yeah. Cause I mean, look, even the stuff like A Kind of Magic from 1986 is classically underrated to me. The Flash Gordon soundtrack, don't even start it on. You know what? No, you know what? Screw it. We're going to end you with this song. This is the way we're going to end out, because this is
double walkout song.
Yeah. No. This is, wait, try to think. Let me just fast forward this a little bit, though.
You got your walk-up music and your walk-off music.
There you go. Come on, how cool is this? Seriously. I mean, the movie was terrible, but this soundtrack was better than the movie. I mean, God, the movie had Timothy Dalton in it, though, by the way, early on in his career.
For those of you kids who don't know what a soundtrack is, there was a time where a band would actually make all the music for a particular movie, and it would just be that one band or that one singer, and they would just sing the entire movie. I think that died with what The Bodyguard, basically. I don't think we saw any more like one person centric soundtracks.
Yeah, after that was like like you saw movies like Singles, or trying to think of, like, because that was a combination of the Seattle sound and everything. That's when in that whole, you're absolutely right. After that was probably the last one I could think of.
Another really terrible movie that Queen was involved in was Highlander. That was back in the 80s. You remember that?
I like the Highlander. Look, I'm a geek. I like
the Highlander too.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Connery does. I mean, Sean Connery playing a Spaniard is one of the funniest things on God to be nerfed. But I mean, Christopher Lambert, I'm the one. Like Christopher Lambert, who ended up playing Raiden in Mortal Kombat, is such a really bad actor. But I don't know.
They did a song for that movie too. Who Wants to Live Forever?
Yeah,
that's a great song. Great song.
Yeah.
And see, So like one time I was asked, I think it was my dad actually asked me, he was like, so why do you like this band so much? And I was like, you know how Shohei Ohtani can pitch and hit? Well, imagine if Shohei Ohtani was also like the LeBron James of basketball and the Connor McDavid of hockey. Like no matter what his genre, he was succeeding in it. So that's why I equate them to a guy like in your high school who literally could play every single sport and do it really, really well. Like it didn't matter what it was. So for me, like they are the genre-less band. Like there's nothing that they haven't been able to do well.
Yeah, the fact that they were able to transition in the '80s, a hard feat. The Who couldn't do it. I mean, who's not? I mean, who's? I'm trying to think of the first Who album after Keith Moon passed away. It was pretty much it after that. I mean, Pete Townsend, his own solo career. Led Zeppelin, same thing. John Bonham passed away. They stopped making music. Not a lot of bands transition into the '80s as successfully as Queen did. You can argue about the the shows and all that stuff, but I like the fact that they went in a different direction and kind of reinvented themselves. I know
I love their attitude now too.
Yeah, because
obviously they've been without their frontman in Freddie Mercury longer than they were with him. So they've actually been together as a band more without him now than with him. So, but their disposition, just their general attitude, like I've heard in interviews, like I've heard the drummer Roger Taylor just be like, hey, like people like to give us a hard time and say that Adam Lambert sucks. And it's like, you know what? And this is his words. He'd be like, okay, well then please don't show up. Please don't come to the concert. Like, I love the fact that he just doesn't care about money and profits. And he's just like, you know what? If that's how you feel, just don't show up. Because look, I mean, he's not here, but we can still play this and we can do it well enough. And we're going to celebrate the stuff that we did. They're not out there trying to make new stuff. And I appreciate that. Like, they did enough stuff during their heyday to not need anything new. And the fact that they're just kind of very like, I don't want to say like it's pompous, but it kind of is. Like it's that like smart, arrogant to this point where like, hey, I know that I'm good at this. I know that we did an unbelievable job at this. So it's your problem if you don't show up.
I mean, look, I mean, you're not going to argue with Brian May,
the Godfather.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? It's crazy. I'm going to be an astrophysicist. And you know what? Guess what? It's crazy.
Dr. Brian May.
Yeah, Dr. Right. Brian May. Also, you know what? I made my own guitar when I was a kid. I made my own guitar. Sorry, Chris. I know we lost you at this because I'll feel bad.
So get this, Chris. So he made his own guitar. And he doesn't even use a pick. He actually uses a coin to play it. He doesn't even use a guitar pick. He actually uses a sixpence. So, yeah, I mean, he's the guitarist that all the other guitarists look up to. And I always think it's cool. Like, you ever go to a restaurant and you just like look at the menu and you're like, I don't know, what are the waiters like? And you just ask the waiter and they tell you. Like, that's the kind of recommendation I like. Is like, if I look at a room full of guitarists, I'm like, hey, who's the best one in here? And they all just point to Brian May. Like, that's what I feel like happens. So for me, you know, that was why I always liked them, was because they had a lead vocalist who had the equivalent of 110 mile an hour fastball. And they had a guitarist who was arguably the best at the time that they came out. So, I mean, the drummer is fine and the bassist, you can take it or leave it. But they had two huge A+ talents in that group. And to me, I love watching great talent. I mean, we watch young talent come through minor league baseball over and over and over. So for me, I like what looks like an amazing skill set. And that's why I've always liked those guys.
Yeah, you got yourself a Verlander and a Scherzer, and then by the way, you got a Fister and a Sanchez. No, what the funny thing? So I think I first became aware of Queen because of Another One Bites the Dust, which I believe was the walk-in music for a wrestler in the WWF back then. It was either Coco Beware or the Junkyard Dog.
Ooh.
I don't remember.
I think it might be Junkyard Dog. I think.
But also, you know, that Flash Gordon theme you were playing, that was that's the beginning of Terminator X to the Edge of Panic.
Oh yeah, good call.
On Public Enemy's "Takes a Nation of Millions to hold us back." So Queen was transcending genres with I mean,
Vanilla. Unfortunately,
great
It
band.
was Junkyard Dog, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes. But, and also, I mean, that was the only band that's had 4 members write a #1 hit. I mean, all 4 members, even the bassist, who he did Another One Bites the Dust. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like one guy was coming up with everything and the other guys were just kind of there. Like, they all had a say and they all did something, which is one of the reasons that they were just so different.
So that was funny. We've gone through 4 Queen songs the entire time. I love it. You know what, Dan? I honestly, had I known, I feel like we've drawn closer to each other than knowing full well that we know as much about Queen. Because usually I talk about indie bands and all that, but Queen was a big influence, huge in Spain. My mom and my entire uncles. It's like there's literally, you go in my uncle's old apartment in Madrid. There's literally like every Queen record, every single you can think of. He had like a Queen mini room. And I remember going there, and he had the headphones I have on right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, and he would have like this record player, and it was just like he had the whole experience. And the first record I listened to was Play the Game. That was the one I got into before, because I always thought that Queen was just those hits. That was it. And then when I started realizing that it's just a lot of back catalog, even Baby Driver, thought of a song that I didn't even think of, Brighton Rock, which is, that's a fan. And even the creator of that movie said it would not have been possible to make that movie had that song not existed. That's a fun fact.
Well, yeah, I mean, he also did. I mean, he kind of got the germ for that movie from the what was the zombie movie he made? Shoot, the director, is it Edgar Wright? I think it is.
Yeah, Edgar Wright. Yeah.
What is it? The zombie movie?
28 Days Later.
No, it's a zombie comedy.
Oh,
there's a scene where they're beating
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead. Yeah, they're beating zombies to a Queen song in the jukebox, and it's all they're hitting them in tune with the song. Like that was I think the beginning of that whole movie. So
you seen that, Dan?
I have. So I have not, and now I have to put it on my list. So I appreciate this. I will tell you this. So my wife and I, we went on a European vacation a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, and one of the stops that I was able to convince her to make and to have her come along with was to go to Montreux, Switzerland. And for huge fans of that band, they will know that there is a casino in Montreux, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. There is a casino that had a recording studio in it. They worked there and they bought the studio because they liked it so much. They liked the city so much. They actually went on a drunken bender with David Bowie one night, and it's actually that bender that produced the song Under Pressure in that studio. So that studio is still preserved, and it is now a shrine. It is an experience. Oh, there you go. And we went to this place. We spent a day here. That's the studio that they recorded their last albums in. And there's a spot in that room that you just saw that actually indicates where Freddie Mercury was the last time he ever sang. And it's that gold plaque right there. So it's on the floor there. If you go to that, there it is. So yeah, but that's the exact room that they were in. And it's just an outstanding, for anybody who's really into it. Yeah, you need to do yourself a favor and make the pilgrimage, because it is worth every bit, every very moment of that.
Yes, I don't know if you guys can hear the sound or not, but this is a sequence that Chris was talking about. But yeah, anyways, it's I'll fast forward a little bit because
it doesn't have the same impact if I can't hear it.
Yeah. That's a bummer that we can't hear it.
Can you play the music while I watch it? That at least maybe kind of
actually, you know what? I just realized I could do something even better than that.
Can I tell you a quick story? And I know we're like totally like diverging here, but about 2 weeks ago, my wife and I went to go see a movie. Went to go see Scream, and so we're in line, and she makes the comment to me. She's like, "Yeah, so so this is like a comedy horror movie." And my first, I didn't think anything of it, but then I came back to it a few minutes later, and I was like, "What the hell's funny about Scream? What's a comedy aspect of this film?" And so then once the movie starts, spoiler alert. So once Scream starts, somebody gets gutted within the first 5 minutes, right? And my wife leans over to me and she just quietly goes, "Oh, there you go."
So random. For fuck's sake. Okay, Diane, get them somewhere safe. David, kill the Queen. What's with the jukebox? Liz, Ed, grab some weaponry. What about the rifle? It's not real. Cocktails. What do you mean? Flaming spirits, Drambuie, Sambuca, brandy, get a racket. Light it. Look, the whole place could go up. What then? How about pool?
Oh, a little off the coordinate, but it's okay. Here we go.
Okay, John. It's time at the bar.
I would love to kill zombies to this song. This looks like so much fun for the whole family.
There's a couple of disgusting scenes, but it's only a few zombie movies I actually like.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Anyway.
I have to finish this. So we just see somebody get gutted and scream, and my wife leans over to me and very quietly goes, "I thought this was Scary Movie." So anyways, for the remainder of the 2 hours of that movie, when anybody was graphically killed, I would just lean over to her and I'd just be like, "Hilarious."
Oh man.
Yeah, what's funny is I kind of viewed actually Scream as a little bit of a comedy too, but it was mostly just because it was self-referential and meta. But it's definitely not like Scary Movie, which is like a Naked Gun style comedy.
No, nobody's gonna confuse it for Airplane anytime soon.
Oh yeah, and I always forget that Dave Arquette was a thing for a minute because he got big from that movie.
Yeah, kind of super weird that David Arquette and his ex-wife Courtney Cox are playing opposite one another in this film.
Yeah, and then he almost died in the ring.
That's the people who get along, the civil folks out there.
So on that note, if you're listening to us on the podcast, I know there was a part there where the video part. So we'll add the video component because one of the things that I've learned in doing a podcast is that if you're watching a video, it's taboo to watch a video during a podcast because no one knows what's going on. So that being said, we'll put the link in the YouTube so everybody can stop bitching. Or just, I've also listened to a podcast so to talk about that. So anyway, that being said, Dan, thanks so much. Hopefully you pass your kidney stone.
Yes.
The metaphorical kidney
stone. Yeah, metaphorical. And of course, the Road to Detroit podcast, you can find past episodes. And you and Nate's gonna be back on behind the producer's chair, I'm assuming.
That's the plan.
Awesome. And I can't wait to meet up in the ballpark sooner or later. And hopefully if you're in this neck of the woods, man, love to get some lunch sometime and not like no Hollywood cliche, but actually sit down and grab some food, man. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that would stop me is the fact that I would probably be, knowing what I know now, would probably have lunch and then be there long enough to have dinner. So, I mean, that's that's on the table. So if we're going to do it, let's carve out some time.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the Hint of Korea, right?
Folks, we're actually closing.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, thanks so much for joining us. And again, everybody go to subscribe to the Road to Detroit podcast. If you listen to us, of course, and plenty of content to go around at motorstatebengals.com. We'll be back on Wednesday. We got 3 episodes this week because I'll be in Chicago next week. Francis Romeo, who is a Cuban baseball writer, writes a ton about the baseball prospects, will be our guest Wednesday. So I'm stoked for that, because this will be the first time kind of branching out with the Tigers. And he wrote a book in Spanish that we'll be discussing with him a little bit, but especially with the international draft being a thing next year. But anything you want to know about Cuban prospects, Romero is the man. He's a guy who I'm a big fan of his work. So we'll look forward to that. Until then, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dan. You're the best.
Boom.